All right, here we are live, coming at you live from Channel 511, Common Sense, Ohio. To start it out, I thought I would read a little excerpt. Perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable to procure them general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right and raises at first a formidable outcry in defense of custom. But the tumult soon subsides. Time makes more converts than reason. That is in Common Sense, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and we are Common Sense, Ohio. Why read that today after all these years of doing Common Sense, Ohio? Because on this day in history, Norm, January 10, Common Sense by Thomas Paine was published, the famous pamphlet that is historically given credence for converting the Americans who at the time sort of thought themselves as British citizens and sort of had a beef with the king. And Paine comes in and says, look, we are not British citizens. We are Europeans. We are citizens of entire Europe. We are a conglomerate. Those who seek freedom and civil liberties, that is who we are. And we are not beholden to this king. We need our own.
Pretty radical.
Pretty radical. And that quote is pretty interesting, right? So it's like when you get accustomed to the kind of lunacy, absurdity, I'm not going to use the word tyranny because that's maybe a little too cliche, but bad government, then you become sort of used to it. And
well, that's your reality.
Yeah,
it becomes your reality, and you're like, oh, it's just how it is. So in California, for instance, we're just not going to do any controlled burns. We're not going to clear the brush from the forest. We're not going to do anything. That's just how it is. And then one day you wake up and the entire state is getting, or the entire city, or like neighborhoods being destroyed and disseminated because these idiots in charge don't do what they're supposed to do. And you know, I think that's what Common Sense was trying to do. That's what Thomas Paine was trying to do. And you know, it's become the backbone of what we're trying to do here. And I think what else is interesting as sort of a parallel, that was a new media, or that was sort of a media option that the people could control back then. You know, we're just going to publish a pamphlet, and what are they going to do? Stop us? Well, I'm sure they tried, and I'm sure there was a lot of efforts to squelch it, but not unlike podcast. You know, we're not going to tolerate this insanity. There's somebody out here with a little bit of common sense is going to start calling the shot, or calling it like we see it. Now, Thomas Paine had his warts, and there were some other issues there. But
I'm sure King George III wanted to deplatform.
Oh, I'm sure he did, right?
Thomas Paine.
I'm sure he did.
Which,
quote unquote deplatform, meaning decapitate.
I just recall reading that people with printing presses were carefully monitored by the monarchy.
Sure.
Yeah, so he was in sort of his, at night and in the back alleys printing this stuff and passing them out. I mean, really sort of cool. Just sort of like
underground,
underground, like we are at Channel 511 KDOC.
and we are literally underground.
So along those lines, back to the normal introduction. That was this day in history, and the other thing on this day in history, Ohio State beat Texas. Or wait a minute, that hasn't happened yet. But it will. We are CommonSenseOhioShow.com. You can check us out at that website where we have all the backlog of episodes. You can check us out on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, all the social media stuff. And look, we do appreciate your support. I know it's difficult where we sit in this bunker week in and week out to really, we don't see the people listening. We don't hear, we're not there with you listening, but we do appreciate you listening. We just ask that you like, you share, you subscribe. We try to bring you a common sense approach. I am hardly always right. Norm is hardly always right. Brett is hardly always right. But we all try to be right all the time. And hopefully in the middle there, somewhere the truth lies. If you've got a topic you want us to cover, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment. Go to the website. Send us a query, and we'll be happy to respond. And with that, we will go over to news with Norm. Lots going on, from fires to Trump to everything in between. So kick us off, Norm.
Some rather epic things. So I think, first of all, why don't we knock down the Trump sentencing that is supposed to happen in Judge Merchan's New York trial courtroom today. He is not requiring Trump to attend, and Trump, from last I heard, has no intention of being there. He's in Mar-a-Lago, last I heard, meeting with Republican governors. So at any rate, he asked the New York Appeals Court, which is what they call their Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, whatever they call it, and he asked the U.S. Supreme Court, both courts independently tried to pursue a delay in the sentencing, and was denied. Two of the Republican members of the Supreme Court, Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, joined with the three liberal members of the Supreme Court for a 5-4 decision against Trump. And I think John Roberts, his main thing, guys, to me, is he's stuck on this idea that no man is above the law. And I think that's complete crap, because I could point to dozens of laws that exculpate politicians, the president, members of the Ohio House of Representatives from all kinds of criminal laws.
All right. So
it's bullshit to say we're all treated equal under the law. That's just factually not true. And we have a long tradition in this country. You know, Biden's pardoning people. People get treated very differently in the criminal justice system, depending on not only who they are, but how much money they have and all kinds of other things, like competent counsel, et cetera. So this idea that Roberts is trying to shove down the throats of the American people, like he's teaching us a lesson that, oh, well, I'm not going to treat Trump any differently than some pickpocket. Bullshit.
All right, so let's break this down. This is usually we do a justice for all segment, and maybe there's another one we can cover when we get to there, but we'll just sort of do that here too. What's going on is Trump is about to get sentenced. Trump's going to get sentenced for this criminal conviction. I find the criminal conviction problematic, for to say the least, for all sorts of reasons. I'm not going to do a dive into that. We've done it before. But irrespective of that, he has been convicted. Like it or not, he has been convicted of crimes.
Well, he will be convicted. Actually,
no, he's convicted.
Well, you and I have a disagreement, and mine is not. So I stayed at a Holiday Inn. That's how much legal knowledge I have. Steve's the expert, but I have heard numerous law school professors say until Merchan deals with the sentencing, Trump is technically not convicted. So he will be a convict today.
Some of this is semantics, but here's the process. A jury returns a verdict of guilty.
Yep.
Often the court then, a trial court judge, will say and memorialize in a court order that says the jury has returned verdicts of guilty on the following offenses. I hereby enter the guilty verdicts, and sentencing is scheduled for whatever date and time.
Yeah.
That's a conviction. It's an inked journalized conviction. The old saw is the court speaks to its journal entry. Now we have a conviction. It is not ripe for any sort of appellate process. It is not. You can't challenge it. You can't really do much to go up the ladder until the sentencing entry is journalized. And so somewhere, I think we're both sort of saying the same thing. But there has been a conviction. He has not yet been sentenced. And maybe that's just the way to leave it. We're talking about definitions of terms more so than what, we all sort of agree what's happening.
The contention is by Turley and,
tell them to call me.
All the talking. Well, these guys teach law, so I assume they know.
I practice law.
Yeah, so I assume they know what they're talking about to some extent. And maybe it's a New York law thing.
It could be something local to New York on how they journalize and define convictions.
Exactly. So my understanding, Steve, is the entire point of turning Trump down 10 days before he's to take office is because up until now, they can't call him a convicted felon technically. And as of today, once Merchan is done with this case, they will be able to say completely and without nobody can deny it, that Trump is going to take office as a convicted felon. And they want that. They want to say, want to be able to say.
That may be.
So that's the political side.
But right. Go ahead, Brett.
No, I was just going to say, obviously, the way you're stacking it up, it makes sense.
Yeah.
They want that. They want that adjective to his name.
You could look at it that way.
Sure.
Or you could look at it this way. Trump is scheduled to be sentenced today. The judge in advance of that has said, look, I'm not sending you to prison. It's not going to be any sort of custodial sentence. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I am going to tell you what it is. And he's not going to postpone sentencing. So there would be probably a way a judge could say, I'm going to stay or postpone this sentence until Trump leaves office. On the other hand, in any sort of case, and I get it that people are different and cases are different, but generally speaking, the rule of law is that the court hates this kind of stuff. It hates delays. It loves finality, and that's true as a general matter. Now, I get it. There are exceptions, and the President of the United States elect might well be one where you would make an exception. Now, this goes up. So what happens is Trump's lawyers file an appeal, or they file a motion or a request with the court to postpone the sentencing, stay it, hold it in abeyance, don't do it until after Trump serves his term as president. The court says no. Trump appeals that. Now, there's all sorts of issues baked into that one. In law, there's something called a final appealable order. In other words, it has to be something that you can appeal. And that kind of decision often is not. In Ohio, that would not necessarily be a final appealable order that I could go to a court of appeals in Ohio. Now, if I can't do that, or if that's not permissible, and I didn't read the briefs, I'm guessing, then the federal courts aren't going to change it because they're going to say, look, we can't do anything about this. You've got to finish this out in state court before we give you any review. And this is normal. This is all basic stuff. Then Trump's lawyers file a brief in the U.S. Supreme Court saying, look, we want you to stay imposition of this sentence. Now, here's what the Supreme Court said in sort of a summary order. These kind of decisions, these are, I don't want to call them collateral type attacks, but it's not a direct appeal of Trump's conviction. It is a request to postpone the sentencing and have the federal courts intervene. Now, here's what they say. The application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor and by her referred to the court is denied for inter alia, which is fancy Latin lawyer talk for saying, among other reasons, the following. First, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course on appeal. That's true. Second, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect's responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. So here's what they're saying, and I can't necessarily say I disagree with this. What they're saying is, look, you've got to show, generally speaking, if you want this kind of remedy, you generally have to show irreparable harm or imminent irreparable harm. And I think what they're really saying is here, they're not convinced that there's imminent irreparable harm because the judge has said unconditional discharge. Now, what is not being discussed yet that I'm going to discuss, if let's say that the sentencing occurs and the judge says, I don't give a flying rat's behind what I told you, you're going to prison. Mm-hmm. Now what? Mm-hmm. Now you're going to have a motion for an immediate stay of the sentence pending appeal. That will be granted. And if it's not granted at the trial court level, it'll be granted at the appellate court level. If it's not granted there, then it'll go all the way up the ladder, and the Supreme Court will, in fact, stay it and not impose the sentence. Because in order for, if you're going to trigger the U.S. Supreme Court's jurisdiction on something like this, it has to have the right hook to do it. And I think what they're saying is we don't have the hook. Now, Amy Coney Barrett signed on to this as well. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, I think she was the one who stayed and postponed imposition of some order during COVID that closed down churches. I forget where the jurisdiction was, but she was the one that was in charge of that. So she's not immune to doing this stuff. But you know, here they've exercised what the scholars might call judicial restraint. On one side, your side, Norm, you're thinking, no, they should have intervened and stopped this so somebody can't call it a conviction. On the other side, I'm looking at this like, all right, well, if the Supreme Court's going to intervene here, then what is the lever of their authority to intervene in all such cases? And then how do you come up with a standard on when they're going to intervene? Is it only when there's a president who's being convicted?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, why not? Why not? That's built into all kinds of federal law. Oh, it is.
But this is not a federal law. There's no statute that says they can intervene. Yeah. So it would be them just intervening and making the federal law.
Although this whole case is pretext on a violation of federal election law.
Fair enough.
And our professor down the road here was denied the ability to testify in this case as to that fact.
Wait a minute. I see the misdirection here. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
That has a lot to do with it.
Look, he was convicted in state court of a crime that was premised upon an allegation that he violated federal law.
Exactly.
Fair enough. It's still a state court conviction.
Right.
and it has to go up the appellate ladder in order to trigger any sort of federal review. It'll get there if it needs to, or hopefully the New York state courts do what they should do. And when Trump, and this may be helpful to Trump on a different level because
well, Dershowitz and Turley said that.
What's going to happen is
that the fact that this guy's going to sentence him today
now Trump
allows
can appeal.
Trump to appeal.
Right.
Exactly
now he's got a
right.
final appealable order.
Exactly right.
And he can appeal, and it'll go up.
Right.
And I think that's what should happen. I think honestly, if I were representing Trump and the judge said, "Look, I'm not going to do anything. I just got to close this thing out. I've got to journalize this and get it off my docket." I deal with that day in and day out, and I get it. It's Trump, but that's pretty normal stuff. You're asking a trial court to delay a sentencing hearing for 4 years. That's a big ask. And
well, they also asked him to just dismiss the case.
Well, they asked him to dismiss it, and look, the judge says no.
Which so that's the point. He's not a convict because he could have this dismissed. In which case, there was no conviction effect.
No, but look, you're monkeying with the time-space continuum here. So he is convicted. The jury has said guilty. The judge is going to sentence him.
The judge can throw it out, too.
The judge could throw it out, and the judge said no.
That's right.
The judge says no.
That's right.
I'm going to maintain the verdict, and you're going to be sentenced. Then you can go forth and prosper.
That's
Go do your appeals. Do what you're going to do, and that'll matriculate up to ultimately the courts of appeals, and probably.
So. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And probably end up, if I'm guessing, I don't know. I mean, maybe this would be an interesting prediction. Does the New York Court of Appeals, and I think the Court of Appeals in New York is actually the Supreme Court that we have in Ohio. So the New York Supreme Court, I think, is the Court of Appeals. I think they have it reversed in New York.
Exactly.
But does the direct appellate court actually reverse this thing?
We'll see.
And then if that happens, just to play appellate ladder, if the New York direct appeal court reverses this, meaning we find that this was an improper conviction for whatever myriad of reasons.
All kinds of rulings by Mershon
were
outrageous.
Now, and I agree with you, now I think it gets reversed on jury instructions, if nothing else. But
if nothing, yes.
But now the state of New York will say, we don't agree with that. We're going to appeal. So they're going to go to the Court of Appeal, which is their Supreme Court, and that court is going to have to decide it.
Yeah.
And if that court holds against Trump, then Trump gets to go to federal court and challenge it there.
Yeah.
Or Trump may file a direct appeal, not go up the appellate court ladder in state court, and maybe do that, plus jump right over and file a petition for cert in the U.S. Supreme Court. There's some procedure for that. So we'll watch how it all shakes out.
Right.
And I think what the Supreme Court is saying here is, look, we're going to look at this. We suspect we're going to look at this.
Right.
But we don't have a record to look at it yet. We need a decision by a court of appeals in order to review it for legality, and then we can tell you what we think. Right. It's not the Supreme Court's job to intervene and give a decision on this yet. It will be soon, because this was a collateral ask. They're saying, look, court, we're just asking you to delay this thing. And the court's like, why?
Yeah.
There's not irreparable harm that's going to happen here and that's because of what the judge said. Now, implicit in that memo opinion is, if it doesn't happen the way the judge says it's going to happen, they're going to jump in. I think there's no question about it.
Well, two things. Two things. The reason you cannot prosecute a sitting president is one of the major philosophical reasons for that is that you don't want a sitting president having to deal with personal litigation while in office.
Sure, a distraction if nothing else.
So what in the F is this, if not that? Number one.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number two, if the way that the state was able to prosecute Trump is based on an alleged violation of federal law, despite the John Edwards opinion, which went to the U.S. Supreme Court, then this case, the foundation for this entire case is based on federal law. And I think federal courts should maybe grant some kind of mandamus or order or finding that Trump, via the Edwards decision, which it was a Supreme Court decision, that Trump did not violate federal election laws by paying it for an NDA.
I agree.
And in which case, Bragg's prosecution here, it just falls apart because it's based on nothing.
How is it any better if the Supreme Court postpones the sentencing? How does it change any of that?
Yeah, I was looking for a better solution than a postponement, but
Well, look,
be that as it may, I've always said, and I know you think this is crack pottery, but since this is based on an alleged violation of federal law, I think Trump can pardon himself.
well, that may be.
He might be.
I think he
I-
could
look,
pardon
I'm not
certainly be
disagreeing. I'm not
interesting with it,
disagreeing
yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
I
was thinking about that the other day, too.
I pardon myself for an alleged violation of federal election laws, in which case the entire foundation for the state case is gone.
So look, it may that's a questionable. That'll be a questionable exercise of power if it occurs for two reasons. One, because the president has never pardoned himself, not to say that couldn't happen.
Yeah, right.
But secondly, because it is still a state court conviction.
I got you.
And there are plenty of state court convictions premised upon. I mean, this is not. It's not every day, but it's not unheard of either. So just because there's federal aspects to the conviction, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that it triggers a presidential pardon power. I believe that a federal court can review this, not just because the state court crimes are premised upon violations of federal law, but because there are other federal issues like fundamental fairness in the process, due process of law, an improper jury instruction that deprived that relieved the burden of proof by the state to prove each and every element of the charged offenses, or it created an impossible scenario that was unfair, sort of baked into it. So we're talking about like due process,
like that
Sixth Amendment right to a trial by jury,
like that jury instruction you just talked about, Steve. That's spot on, man.
Right.
That's smart.
That's right.
He told the jurors, get this, folks. Mershon told the jurors that they did not have to specify what underlying violation of the law that they were basing this fraud upon.
And that's a due process problem. In state court,
you
looking
be
at
kidding me.
That's a fundamental fairness in the trial process. That's a due process problem in the state court system that can be reviewed by the federal courts. So the federal courts, there's jurisdiction here in the federal courts as long as these lawyers Trump's lawyers have federalized the issues. Now, here's what I mean by that. Objection, judge, they can't do this. And the judge say, what's the basis of your objection? And if Trump's lawyers are simply saying, well, this violates New York State Code, blah, 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 and they don't cite any federal issues relevant to the objections, I'm oversimplifying. But they don't cite, if they don't federalize the issues, well, there might be a problem getting it to federal court. So the first, if I objected to this, if I had the jury instructions, I would say, Judge, this is fundamentally unfair. It relieves the state of proving each and every element of the charged offenses beyond a reasonable doubt because the jury is being instructed on law that's nonsense. There's no way to interpret this in any way, shape, or form that gives them any firm criteria to decide the case. That deprives my client of his right to trial by jury. It relieves them of their burden of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. You start citing cases like In re Winship, and you make it a federal issue as well as a state court issue. Now, once Trump is sentenced, you file your notice of appeal, and then you file your stay. Then you say, do not enforce this sentence, whatever it is. I don't care if it's probation. I don't care if he has to go provide community service for 1 minute. You file a motion to stay that sentence. Now you're off to the races. So I think it's a little premature, and I doubt that Trump's lawyers even expected they would win this. I don't know.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think it's a little bit premature.
Well, it's been kangaroo court all along. So.
Well, I mean, in the Supreme Court. I mean, look, I would have been.
It sounds like the defense attorneys for Trump kind of let him down.
How so?
In the description you just said, why didn't they do what you said?
Oh, they probably did.
They probably did.
Yeah. No. I'm saying if they
okay.
did. I haven't followed it.
Steve's saying that's how you get there.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
now when you appeal the case, you read the record, and I'm sure they did this not only verbally but in pleadings.
Gotcha.
He had a competent team of attorneys.
I'm not saying they didn't though either, but at the same time, they didn't have you.
They didn't have me. I'm still here, by the way. They didn't have me, but I'm sure that he had a competent team of attorneys who knew how to federalize these issues and make it so once we got to this point, after Trump is sentenced remotely at Mar-a-Lago while he's sipping his coffee, he's going to file. They probably already have the pleadings ready to file a motion to stay execution of the sentence so he can appeal. Now everything is just sort of delayed. He's getting what he asked for. It just has to happen after sentencing. And semantically, I don't give a rat's ass if they call it a conviction or not call it a conviction before or after sentence. It doesn't make any difference to me. And I don't think it makes any difference to the public.
Not at this point. I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with you. I mean, people processed that back on November the 5th. I mean, people took that into account because this whole thing
Oh,
happened well before.
exactly.
A rose by any other name is still a rose.
Yeah.
Well, Trump's not convicted. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
They said guilty.
right.
Yeah, but he's not convicted.
Yeah. And now they get to officially,
I think
Now they can say,
officially he's already been. As soon as there was a journal entry saying guilty, he's convicted. Case isn't done. It's not ripe for appeal yet, but he's convicted.
Okay, Steve, you said that 10 times.
Yeah, I'm right. And look, I'd be happy to talk to Dershowitz about it, and he would say the same thing I'm saying. It's a semantical distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
No,
Yeah, I'm not going to argue about
So
it.
here, and look, I will offer as this. In Ohio, we have something called intervention in lieu of conviction.
Okay.
So intervention in lieu of conviction works this way. Let's say I committed a crime of possession of drugs because I have a drug problem, and it's a lower level felony. And what happens is I file a motion statutorily. There's a mechanism to do this. I file a motion with the court, and I say, Judge, I'm seeking intervention in lieu of conviction. We used to call it treatment in lieu of conviction.
Okay.
So what I'm seeking is I want to get treatment and intervention psychologically or for my substance abuse issues. And if I complete that, then the case gets dismissed.
Yeah, hold those papers.
Yes.
Give me a chance to rectify this.
I go into court and I plead guilty.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And I am I can even get sentenced.
Yeah.
And then the judge holds that, and those guilty papers even get filed on some, depending on the process. Now, it's not entered into the judgment record yet. So it's just this weird nebulous area. Am I convicted? Am I not convicted? For some purposes, Ohio law would say you're convicted. So if you have a professional license, it's going to show up as a conviction, even though you haven't been sentenced yet.
Okay. I like this discretion. I like judges having,
it's a good program.
That's right.
It's a good program.
Right.
So if you
my dad as a judge hated these mandatory minimums, hated it because it took out of his hands, if you will, the art of individualizing.
That's right. So this is a relevant debate in Ohio and elsewhere right now.
Sure
sentencing law, because on the one hand you've got tough on crime, tough on crime, tough on crime. On the other hand, you've got wait a minute, give these guys a break, and you got different judges doing different things. So you get these outrageous sentences on one case, but not on the other. So the competing interests are: we would like to have these factors that sort of stabilize outcomes and equalize outcomes. The problem is, like everything else that you try to equalize, you get ridiculous results.
Yeah, sure.
So somebody deserves this, somebody else deserves that. You're taking out individualism when you do that.
That's right.
And intervention in lieu is one of those ways that you can add individualism. But my point of saying this is, it's sort of a blurry definition of what a conviction is in that area.
Yeah.
For some people, that's a conviction, but technically speaking, it's not a conviction. But for other people, it's it's like, I don't know. And Trump is in that. Look, whether I argue with Dershowitz or whoever else about whether this is a formal conviction, he's been convicted of a felony because the jury said guilty. Whether it's technically in some legal standard in New York called a conviction, I don't care.
Yeah.
As soon as he's sentenced, now he can appeal.
Okay. Well, L.A. fires.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot to talk about with this, and my basic thing. So I'll just be the bull in the china shop here. We're talking 10,000 structures so far have been burned to the ground. 10 people so far are known to be dead. The total bill so far in all the fires, I think only one fire is 6% contained. Right. The rest are still going.
With no end in sight.
No end in sight.
The only thing that'll stop it is fuel.
Yep. So 150 billion is what they're saying. And that's going to come out of the other 49 states.
Yeah, we're paying for that.
We're going to pay for gross incompetence by public officials.
Yes. I got to tell you.
I agree.
This first and foremost.
I agree.
We need to discuss what this. Look, I was a history major, and I came through, and my advisor was a teacher who taught history from like the people's perspective. So like, what was it like to be a peasant in medieval times? You know?
Yeah.
And look, it's an interesting way to learn history. It shouldn't be the only way. It should be part of a bigger education in history. You got to know the backbone first. But my point is, that sort of trained me to think about what are the people seeing at the time. Like, so put yourself in the shoes of you 2 weeks ago at Christmas. You came home to your house, and your neighbors had Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And their son was home for the holidays, so you're son was hanging out with them, and you were going to the local bar, and on Thanksgiving you're drinking the traditional. The night before Thanksgiving, everybody's back and they're having their libations and doing whatever.
Rose Bowl.
You watch the Rose Bowl
all kinds
together.
of cool, you know, which is local to L.A.
You went around the corner to the local coffee shop, and
Yeah.
you had coffee, and on your days off, enjoying the holidays.
Yeah.
And you went to the local hardware store because you wanted to get a new extension cord for your Christmas lights, and you went to the local church. And today it's all gone. I mean, not just you can't go. It is not there.
It's not there.
It is burned to a crisp, not there. Like, look at the pictures. It is insane. I mean, and these people have lost everything.
And the thing is, Steve, L.A. went through a very serious fire just 10 years ago.
Well,
very similar.
In 2020.
In the same hills
Yeah.
of Malibu, the same general area. And the federal government offered Newsom transference of water resources from Northern California to Southern California, fill up the reservoirs, be ready for the next fire because there's going to be one.
Right. So,
and they didn't do it.
all you got to do is Google this. Go back to about 2018, 2019, and look at all the talking heads, Trump included, saying, look, this is just a matter of time, you idiots.
Yeah.
You idiots.
Yeah.
All you have to do is clear the crap from the forest, rake the forest.
Right.
All you have to do is get rid of the deadwood. All you have to do is a few controlled burns. All you have to do is allow the water to get piped in so you can protect it. Dig a couple reservoirs, save it. Don't let it just get washed out to the Pacific Ocean. I mean, look, these are on the ocean.
Yeah.
You can't tell me there's not water around.
Right.
For this kind of purpose.
Honestly,
anyway.
stick a pump into the Pacific Ocean and pump salt water up there.
So do some control or employ. Now, why didn't they? Well, so I think for a couple reasons, and I this is classic leftist lunacy. So instead of this kind of stuff, they're spending money in all other places, right? To equitalize or equalize everything else. And
exactly.
Secondly, the environmentalist lobby out there is overwhelming, banging a table, saying basically, we don't want to disturb the forest because of whatever is going to happen.
Oh,
if you
the
rake
water
out.
thing was a smelt.
And the water is to fix,
it was
save a smelt.
It was an inedible, non-important smelt.
Which sort of so all of these things come into play, and I don't. There are conspiracy theorists out there saying this is what they want to do. They want to destroy everything so they can create dependence on government. I don't go that far. I think this is just gross, utter, complete, nonsensical incompetence. This is like, and if there is something bigger to me, it's this idea of where humans fall in the spectrum of the world.
So can I throw some support to your incompetence? So one of the things I heard, which I mean has been confirmed even by the governor's office out there, is that because electrical wires can trigger or add to a fire, they shut down electrical grids. Those electrical grids were what was powering the pumping stations for the fire department's water. So when they realize these guys are opening up hydrants and nothing's
is that the reason there's no water?
That was one of the reasons. One of the there's other.
I laugh only because it's so tragic.
So they
tragic. Exactly.
You guys don't practice this. You don't shut down the electrical grid and then see what that affects.
Right.
Apparently not.
Wow.
And so
who's
now,
in charge? Now they
so Steve, the solution was to try to find so instead of flipping the electric back on, they went on this treasure Easter egg hunt for generators to take out to each pumping station.
It's just so
Meanwhile, people are dying and their homes are burning down.
So it's like, what is important? I agree. I mean, this is insane. And then now it's coming out that the mayor cut by, $20 million, the fire department's budget, and used the money where, I ask. I have no idea.
Right.
They prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion in the fire department hiring, not competence. And I'm not saying those who were hired because of their gender, their race, or their sexual preference are competent. But look, why does it matter? Hire somebody who's good at the damn job, who wants to do the damn job, who's going to be there to do the damn job.
And has to be very good at that job, too.
And be good at it. I don't care what's between your legs. I don't care who you sleep with at night. I don't care who you're married to.
Exactly.
I don't care your pigment of your skin. I could care less.
Right.
Do the damn job.
Do the damn job.
And maybe that I can't say that this happened because of that, but it shows you the focus of people instead of the reality of things. And then back what I was saying before is like, Get to like this bigger picture. I used to say when I argued with somebody, a friend of mine, about this, I would always say, like, you just hate humans. And she'd be like, no, no, you do hate humans.
Yeah.
Like, look, not to get I will get a little biblical about it, but Genesis says this, right? We are in control of the fish in the seas and all, it's like, these are all yours.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that if you're a believer or you have faith, maybe you say that is the truth and that's why it's that way. Or you could look at it another way, or maybe the Bible just reflects the truth of how it is.
Yeah.
Because it is that way.
It is that way.
It is that way. Right. And, we have this same instincts of self-preservation that the lowest common denominator animal does. And, you could look at it that way very secularly.
Right.
So we have to preserve ourselves. And if we want energy to live, if we want to protect our property, if we want to have peace and not worry like a third world country about our cities burning down without water, then we can't care as much about the smelt as we do our own safety.
Right. For God's sakes,
we can't.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't mean you disregard wildlife. You give it its due.
That's right.
But at some point,
you balance.
You've got
what's going on here.
You don't forgo the your population's safety for this nonsense. You don't do it.
Create a little natural resource pond.
Kids aren't going home.
So the smelts, have a place to live, a sample population, and then do the
thing.
The public works project to save a city.
I mean, don't do more than you need to. Don't go overboard with it, but do what you need to do. So when this happens again, and it's not like they didn't know. It's like every other natural tragedy like this.
So I'm listening to National Proletariat Radio, NPR, government radio that we pay for, along with fundraisers. I'm listening to that coming in. And one of the reporters says, they're, horror of horrors. They're throwing politics into the LA fire discussion. And I'm like, so what? Politics is how we elect these people. Politics is how they prioritize the spending. Politics determines all this. And I'll give an example. 100 years ago, when the National Weather Service of the United States failed to predict the hurricane that destroyed Galveston, Texas, people were held accountable politically. Yeah. There were hearings. People at the National Weather Service got fired because they effed up.
Yeah.
Like, Steve, when you F up, like, you could be taken to the Bar Association.
Yeah, there's a consequence.
Yeah. I mean, why do these people get away with being incompetent is what I don't get.
Another bigger picture here is this, and maybe this is sort of the heart of it. It's like what we have to ask, what is the fundamental role of our government? And, they particularly in California, they've taken on all these things. Like, we are going to create equality. We're going to protect the smelt. We're going to do all these things. And that's all. And in order to effectuate those things, it takes money. And I mean, the presumption is that they're able to do those things, which they're not. You can't legislate ideology. You can't do it. You can't say, Norm, it's illegal for you to be a racist, so you're not a racist anymore. You can't do that. Because there's human nature at play. So, what is the role of government? The role of government is to preserve the peace, to provide public works. Yeah. Like even the most staunch libertarian would agree that this is the role of government.
Right.
Yeah. The role of government is to have a damn fire department. So when you have a fire, it can be put out.
Did you see that?
They failed.
And it's not the government's job to, back to the equality of it, that I think it's called FAIR, that California, I just heard this coming in this morning, California had put a stipulation on the growth of insurance companies that they could only raise their rates by 7% every year.
That's right.
So that's why Allstate and State Farm did not renew policies.
That's right.
And the state of California, I think it's under a FAIR Act, FAIR,
You're correct.
Came in and they now, I think, carry 75-80% of the policies through there because of these companies going down. They had just released, like this past year, no caps. It didn't help, though. After they see this fire, they're done. They're out.
It's too late.
So we're going to be paying for this burden that Mommy and Daddy California is like, we'll take care of you. We'll allow this to be inundated with population that shouldn't be here.
Yeah,
they allowed that development.
And I always say, why should some grandma in Kansas City, Missouri, right, who's getting $15,000 a year in Social Security, why should her taxes be bailing out California.
Well,
so
they're
this is when
yeah, exactly.
the presumption that the government is able to dictate the value of insurance.
That's crazy.
And not better than the insurance companies can.
Right.
Think about that insanity.
Right.
So the government
and
says,
it's
look,
an open marketplace, Steve. You
Right.
can shop around.
you can shop
Right.
around. So
And
the
if it's too
government says,
expensive and you can't get covered, then you don't build your damn house.
You don't build your house
in the forest or whatever the hell they're calling it through there.
In the
You don't
middle
build there.
or you run the risk.
or you
Exactly.
assume the risk.
That's right.
And what happens then is people don't build billion-dollar houses; they build cheaper
Exactly.
houses.
That's
So
right.
if there is a loss, it's not that significant, and then the insurance is less because it only costs $100,000 to replace it than $1 million.
Right. Yeah.
I'm making those numbers up, but you
But,
get
yeah.
it.
Right.
So the market fixes this, but instead the government says, no, State Farm, you charge too much. And what does State Farm do?
We're out of here.
We're
They're
outta
going to
here.
say, look, you can't make me be in business.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm gone.
Bye-bye.
We're
I
not
can't.
a non-profit.
We'll
We have
stay
to
in
make money.
Arizona, Nevada,
Right.
Utah.
Right.
But we're not going to write policies.
We're not going to write policies. And
Yeah.
the same thing happened on the coast with the hurricanes and everything else. And
Yep.
so what do they do? They go in and they build these billion-dollar mansions because the government's forcing everybody to, and then this happens.
And then this.
And who's going to pay? You're exactly right,
Yeah.
Brett. We are going to pay. How are we going to pay? Our tax dollars are going to go to help and look, it's hard at this point to say, well, you can't use my tax dollars to help them. I think,
Hell, after you pay your taxes, you don't have any say in it.
you know, saying it anyway. But look, I mean, so I think
Yeah.
everybody. It's not that we don't want to help these people because
No.
they have been victimized by draconian insanity.
But if you're going to, so Steve, if you're going to help an entire county with tornado damage, hurricane flood damage, fire damage, what if you're the only house that got flooded or got hit by the tornado, or you're the only house that burned down? That particular family is just as affected
That's right.
as 10,000 families. So I don't get the whole FEMA philosophy to begin with.
No,
if you're
don't.
going to help 10,000 people, why aren't you helping just the one?
Just the one, right? Why does the scope of the disaster dictate whether you give money to the people who are aggrieved?
100%.
Well, and you know what this smells of? Hawaii 2.0.
It does.
Exactly.
It does.
It really does.
Not in regards to letting it burn.
But the incompetence.
the incompetence, as well as does the state go in and start taking over?
Who's going to take the land? Right. So who's
gonna-
now going to
'cause
own the land?
That land is now upside down
So
in dollars.
Along the coast, I have heard that there's this authority in California, the California Coastal Infrastructure Authority or whatever. You can't move So if you're Paris Hilton, who lost her mansion, right, on the coast. So if Paris goes back and wants to move a boulder from this location to 3 feet over this, she's got to go through a hearing to move sand, boulders, much less rebuild that sucker. So, man, I don't know. I don't know if they're ever – it could be – that they'll never rebuild some of these.
Right.
That's right.
I'm
right.
thinking
And
that.
these people
and you're
are
right. The
just-
government takes the land. The government owns land. Look,
That's right.
that's the conspiracy theorist side of it.
Yeah.
And you could ask, now, did it start because of that, or is that just a consequence of this?
Yeah,
I mean,
a happy-
I'll go with the consequence, but yeah,
you can
exactly.
see how, like I've
Yeah.
always said, like during COVID and everywhere else, there's always a constellation of stars that you can connect to find a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think that California, and they're doing this in Florida, they're writing those rebuild regs so tight now that they kind of know nobody can meet it.
right.
Like you would have to be Elon Musk.
Well, that's
or-
right.
yeah.
So, in large part,
and then they give
government
what they-
regulation created this problem
Yeah.
in all sorts of ways that we've identified.
Yeah.
And now it's going to now the government is going to come in and do what it's going to do, right?
Yep.
I mean, now it's got it. So
all that zoning shit.
Yeah.
All
Oh,
these
that's right.
people that were grandfathered because they
they
had.
get what they want now. The government, and so now now we're really going to protect the smelt.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Wow.
know, and look what that does. So, all right, let's go to Thomas Sowell for a second in basic economics, and look what this does. And it's not just Thomas Sowell; this is basic economics.
right.
So now, if that land is taken over by the government or regulated to the extent that it's cost prohibitive to build on that land,
Right.
or to replace those houses because they've been grandfathered in.
Right.
Well, you know what? They don't make land anymore, and land becomes even more scarce. So Thomas Sowell talks, economics always starts with this idea of scarcity, and we don't have an infinity of anything. So there's scarcity, and the more scarce something is, the more the cost goes up. So now what's going to happen? There's less land to build on. Housing is going to go up.
Oh, for sure.
So the lumber is not going to change its price. In fact, the lumber may go down because for a while it'll go up because there's a demand, but eventually, whatever it is, but lumber will adjust, and materials will adjust. But you can't. Now the land is even more scarce in California because they're not going to let you build on the coast.
Yeah, I think the comedian I saw last night, L.A. resident, I think he may have lost his home, Adam Carolla, right? Big podcast guy.
Yeah.
He said that I think the figure was 100,000 homeless people were created by this fire. And so, like you say, Steve, just imagine the economics of that. Yeah. The Howard Johnsons and the Hiltons and the Days Inns.
It's a disaster.
Dude, they're jacking their
So
rent.
what worries me even more is now the government declares an emergency and they start implementing emergency powers. I mean, it's just like you can just see all this happening, and it all is tragic. Yeah. It's awful. I'm sorry. I'm praying for everybody that lost their everything, and
Absolutely.
It just is. It's so insane. It's like we go back, and I remember reading about the Chicago fire, about the old cow that kicked the can, did this and did all this. It sort of reminds me of that. It's like, the incompetence.
And the San Francisco fire.
The San Francisco fire,
it burned
another
down
one.
almost the entire city.
Yeah.
Because it was all made of wood. And
just short memories.
Yeah.
Well, man, we are stacked on legal stuff. I think we should talk a little bit about the Supreme Court is going to be hearing the TikTok case this morning. Yeah.
Did I not hear that there's a buyer for TikTok now?
I heard rumblings there's somebody, but I don't know who it is.
The saber rattling by TikTok is that they will not seek an American buyer. That this is what they're saying pre-trial, pre-hearing at the Supreme Court. So they lost in federal appeals court. And they appealed to the Supreme Court for relief from this congressional bill, which gives the president the power under national security to ban foreign ownership of Internet properties. And I think that's the general situation.
So the headline
they're saying they won't sell. They're saying they'll shut the mother down.
Well, there's the news yesterday was that Shark Tank host Kevin O'Leary and billionaire Frank McCourt want to buy TikTok.
There you go.
So that's like another Elon Musk play.
If they buy it, they won't sell them the algorithm, and the algorithm is the recipe. TikTok is nothing without the algorithm, and the owners will not. Apparently not.
Apparently that's
because Facebook, Meta, they don't know what's. From what I read, they don't get the algorithm. They don't understand it.
So
it just feeds you weird differently than Meta.
So
and stuff like that.
When Elon bought Twitter, he got that.
He got that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the secret sauce.
But they're not.
They won't do it.
They won't give it up.
So even with the ban, so let's just say it goes all the way through, and there are fines levied and that sort of thing. You know who's being fined if it's available. Apple and Google. TikTok doesn't get hurt by this, other than they're not allowed to be in the United States. TikTok's going to survive. In other countries, and it's just that app will just die in your phone. It won't be updated.
And how do you stop people from accessing it? I guess
I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, they could get on a VPN,
I would think,
and go to TikTok.
There's a dark web.
Australia, TikTok, Australia.
And not only how do you stop it, like what's the power of the government to stop it? It's like that starts to get a little dicey.
It's interesting, yeah. And the free speech of it bothers me too. It just, I don't like a foreign entity owning it, but from what I've read, they've taken measures to stop the foreign ownership from seeing information. They've got a data bank. It's in Texas, and it's separate that they can't access. I don't know how good that is. If it's Fort Knox or not, I don't know.
Beyond my knowledge.
I don't know.
The New York Times this morning had an article that said they looked at TikTok's content with regards to Chinese controversial issues like Tiananmen Square, like Taiwan, like Hong Kong. And guess what? They suppress those things.
Oh, I bet so. Oh, yeah.
So free speech, my ass.
Yeah. Well, in regards to the platform being able to be used for that. But again, you know what? If TikTok goes away, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
I could care less.
It's brain rot, honestly. It's brain rot.
Would we have allowed Nazi Germany to own, I don't know, CBS radio?
I know. Well,
I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with saying China can't own TikTok, at least not in our country. I mean,
right.
I think that's a legitimate government interest.
I do too.
I mean, I don't like that there is percentage of foreign ownership into media companies at this point in time.
Absolutely.
10, 20%. I don't like that. Or they own land. They own land here.
Let me support you. Rupert Murdoch is an Australian, right? He owns Fox News, right? He owns the Wall Street Journal, right? And there's that Chinese Shin, I always forget the name of it, but the enemy of the Chinese communists own the Washington Times, right? So, there is one, but those aren't enemies.
So that's the one side of the social media equation, and the other side of the social media equation is Zuckerberg coming forward.
Oh, good one, Steve.
And,
good one.
I mean, really, what?
Good one.
You've just seen this transformation of Zuckerberg in the last 2 or 3 years. Like all of a sudden he starts to train.
Well, explain what he just did. I bet some people
he was a bit more tanned up. Did you notice?
Oh yeah, he's all.
So he's the same tanning bed as Trump.
He's a 40-year-old guy who started out Facebook making fun of college sorority girls that weren't cute enough, and he would out them like. Do a picture, call them a name. Hey, look at Bertha the Big Pig, right? That's what Facebook started out as. This guy was a kind of a mean little weenie.
He's grown up.
He's 40 now.
He's grown up, and he's starting to see a little bit of truth in the world. And now he has come out and basically said, look, we admit that we were using algorithms at behest of the government pressure that suppressed. Now, he's not going so far as to say just conservative speech, but it's thinly veiled behind what he's saying. That suppressed politics. And he's admitting now, contrary to some of his early testimony, that he's succumbed to that pressure, and now they're not going to do it anymore. And he's going to instead follow the Twitter or the X model.
Community. So what's it called? Community. It's going to go through a community, I guess. What is it? Community notes. Thank you.
And what he's talking about there is the fact checkers. And here's specifically what he said. We have found that the fact checkers that we have used and relied upon are biased. And they weren't checking facts fairly. They weren't giving us a fair and honest assessment of whether something was true or not. So we're going to go through the community notes or somebody else.
Well, did you hear what he said he's going to do with the fact checkers that are remaining on the job? He's moving them to Texas.
I thought that was the odd. Okay, so tell me, what does that mean?
I don't know. It's symbolic,
That's the only thing I could figure is like, what the hell?
Well, he's following Elon.
That's what I'm. It's like I heard him say, I'm going, where did that come from?
Well, where are they now?
They're in San Francisco.
Right.
They're in Silicon Valley.
They're in Silicon Valley.
So, I thought that was the
and they're probably
answer.
all H-1Bs.
Maybe
too.
he is. Maybe he is saying, "I'm going to get out of the boot of regulatory crap in California. We're going to go to Texas, where we can't be influenced by the government."
It's signaling something.
It's like metaphorically that maybe
has
is what
to
he's
be.
saying.
Yeah.
So who's that? Is it Dana White? He put on the board.
Yeah.
He put on the board of
Dana
Meta.
White's on the board,
and Dana said, "Hey, this shit's gone, or I'm not going to get on the board."
Yeah.
I mean, that was he kind of occasioned.
And Dana White, so like he became cronies with Dana White. He started to train. He started to, it's like you could just see this transformation.
Yeah.
And I think he finally just grew up.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
He finally just grew up.
I mean,
said,
I'll let him.
I think it's awesome, and I think it's awesome this way, or for this reason, is that let's say that he was that Zuckerberg was sort of succumbed to the ideology for a while. That was this far left insanity for a while.
Right.
And as he grew up, as he experienced the world, as he testified in Congress, or as sort of things emerged in front of him, he realized that he was wrong.
You're a Winston Churchill fan.
I am.
He had a comment about when you're young, you operate from your heart and you don't really use your brain.
Yeah.
And as you age, like this, maybe he's starting to,
redemption.
Yeah.
This is human transformation and redemption. We are all subject to it, and we're all encouraged to do it. And if you don't, if you're so look, this is an interesting way to look at this. If you judge Zuckerberg and say, I don't care, he was this evil bastard, did all these things to me, so screw him.
Right.
He's not worthy of anything.
Right.
And if you would have done that, then look what you would have lost.
Sure.
Him coming forward and say, look, I made a mistake. Now, this may be a mistake. I don't know, but at least he's doing something.
He may not be sincere.
He may not be.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
But he's got the right to say.
I'll tell you what, when Dana White resigns from the board, then we'll know.
Yeah.
He wasn't
right.
There's a little bit of accountability with the board he's picked. It's not. It's not going to be a rubber stamp of this old way.
Yeah. And like you said, his maturity kind of is making him look going, damn it, this is my company.
It's my company.
This is my company. I'm kind of tired of playing these games, and now I'm going to go back to what
And
it was originally. See what happens.
And what do you guys
cost
think?
him a lot of money to
what do you
this.
guys think? I mean, look, it corresponds, coincidentally, with the election.
It does.
Yes,
with,
it does.
With Trump's
Timing
election,
is odd, but
with
yeah.
Congress. So he's a little like.
And he went to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump.
He's free of the jackboot. If there was government pressure on him to do those things, well, it's gone.
Yeah.
Or at least
Section 130 or whatever that was.
Yeah, but really what it was is a Congress saying, you better do this or we will. And I'm sure that I don't know all the ins and outs, but almost always there's money strings attached to all that.
Yeah, right.
Or you're just your pressure to operate or your ability to operate without regulatory crap. So which is money in and of itself.
Money, yeah.
Well, so he's free of that now. So now he can sort of you could say, look, he we should ask, would he have done this but for the election?
I don't know. We'll never know.
Mr. Zuckerberg, come right down.
Yeah. Well, and from what I'm reading some futures of what social media may look like in this year and coming years, social media platforms may take a look at actually developing influencers, paying influencers to deliver news, to deliver
to spin it.
It's already sort of happening anyway, isn't it?
And that may open the door for him to go, let's get some influence and I'll pay them. Get them on the payroll.
Absolutely.
And they are the face of Facebook, basically, of these 100 influencers that are just doing their thing.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay them versus paying per click or per view. And we're just going to pay them right out of pocket.
And look,
just do it.
We have a real life laboratory right here because I think we have noticed certain reels or clips get a little more attention than other reels or clips in our show.
It's unbelievable.
Who am I to cast aspersions at whether that is some intentional algorithm by Facebook? But I have a hunch.
It's unbelievable.
And
it's like, really noticeable on Google's platform.
Yeah.
That's really the worst one where we get 800 views and then the next post gets 0 views.
Like, how's that happen?
And you just know it's because it's been suppressed.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
can't prove it, but it seems
it smells like it.
Yeah.
All right. So look, we've been at it. You want to cover one or two more?
Yeah,
we got to get to the end.
I think one, and then we'll go right. I mean, if you guys want, we'll go right to goods and bads.
Yeah.
But I think one trend that happened this week that we need to keep our eye on this is New York Governor Kathy Hochul. For the first time in a big city, there have been little teeny towns that have done this, but she imposed what is called congestion pricing on New York City. Right, without even Eric Adams,
Congestion pricing.
So what
is crazy.
What that means is there is a hard demarcation line around the central city in New York, and I guess it's GPS monitored. And if you take a car into the central city, like you're delivering pizza, maybe deliver 100 pizzas, and you're just outside that line, and you're going into the city. With a car, it's $9 per entry. With a truck, it's $20 per entry. And you could just see Amazon like all day long crossing.
I know.
So that the taxi cab people, everybody,
do you really need?
They're flipping out.
Do you really need an economics degree to understand what this is going to do?
Exactly.
I mean, really.
Really.
I mean,
right?
really. So one of two things happens. Either people don't deliver to people in New York anymore, or the price of stuff in New York is going to skyrocket. Those are the only two possible things. You're not going to control the pricing or the congestion in any way, shape, or form. In fact, you might end up with exactly what you want, which is zero congestion in New York because nobody's going there.
Right. So the central London has done this, Berlin, Paris,
and what are the
Rome.
What's the outcome?
Well, how to put this? All the middle class and lower middle class regular schmoes are just screaming.
Right, we can't get anything.
And also their car. So there's some nuances. So like in London, if you have a brand new EV compliant car, you can enter the central city no charge. Right.
Oh, good.
So basically, it means well-to-do people don't pay this.
Right.
And now, if you've got an 18-year-old Volkswagen,
well, it has
Golf,
nothing to do with congestion then either. If you think about it,
they're saying pollution, congestion.
Oh, okay. If they marry the two, okay.
All
right. If they're tying it together, okay, that's a different story.
Bullshit.
Which is
yeah.
But so if you're just a regular schmo, right? You
this
got an
stuff
18.
Always puts the jackboot on
the little guy.
On the little guy. Always. Always.
The single mom who's
Despite
trying.
your intent.
It's racist.
It is racist.
If you think about it.
The desperate impact of this on lower income households and families, both black and white or whatever ethnic origin.
There's going to be a better word than racist for this situation.
Think of a single mom that's doing DoorDash to make ends
now
meet.
she can't.
And she's got an 18-year-old Honda. She can't do it.
And look, I ordered a couple of things from Amazon last week. Not expensive things, little things.
Tools, whatever.
Like headphone pads, because mine have worn out. Mm-hmm. All right, so that cost me $15. And I could have gone over to some store and found it, but I ordered it on Amazon, and it showed up at my door because of my Prime membership for free.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I can't now get that in these areas because now it's either going to cost me more. I'll have to pay for delivery, or they won't deliver at all. And so who's losing?
It's just nuts.
Who's losing?
The whole thing's nuts.
Right. So and extrapolate that out to things like essentials. So food. People order food now. Dog food. People order. Like your whatever sundries you rely on day in and day out.
Well, a lot of people in New York City don't own cars,
and
they
rely on this stuff.
Of the supply chain coming in, exactly, and they live meal to meal because they have no room.
Shame on you, idiots!
I know.
Shame on you,
Kathy Hochul.
Shame on you, idiots.
You guys just want to...
All right, outrageously wonderful. I mean, I'll start. The most outrageous thing I've heard in recent era, and I've heard it, we've been monitoring it now for years, and we talked about it already, is this insanity of the fire control out in California and the jackboot of the government screwing it up to the point where now people are literally homeless because of this. I mean, this is the consequence. You people who tout your goal of helping the little guy have now your signaled virtue of this nonsense while you go to your safe house. Well, screw you people, because now you've rendered thousands and thousands of people homeless, and now we have to pay for it, and we will, because we're the United States of America. But F you.
Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people in North Carolina are living in tents in the middle of the winter.
Right.
Where's their FEMA help?
Exactly. Yeah. The Girl Scouts are going to be not selling s'mores and toastier cookies this year. They're gone.
Pourquoi?
Wow.
All gone. So if you're really wanting s'mores and toastier, done. And they're going to cost more too, probably $1 more per box.
Well, the good news is there's probably lots of preservatives. So if you've saved them there's probably a stockpile of them somewhere. So even if there's an expiration date, you might be able to push that a little bit.
Or just get your favorite. Go to an ice cream. Get an ice cream. It's usually somebody has Girl Scout cookies mixed in with their ice cream.
Yeah, that's right. Or just get the Thin Mints.
Just go with the norms, exactly. But anyway, the price of Girl Scout cookies probably will go up again to probably around $7.
The Samoas. You don't really need anything other than the Samoans anyway.
So my outrage is we're about to encounter a slew of Joe Biden pardons on prospective prosecutions. And Steve and I had an interesting discussion a couple of weeks ago, and Steve quite rightly said he thinks that you could pardon in the present time for actions and crimes that may have had in the past. And so that kind of blew away my idea, my bright idea that when Trump takes office day one, he should just say, okay, for the next 4 years, everybody in the White House, you're pardoned.
I think he's got to wait.
Okay. So I thought about this a little bit, and I wasn't smart and fast enough to talk to Steve that day. But I thought, wouldn't this be outrageous? When Trump's final day in office rolls around, he can say, okay, now you're all pardoned for the past 4 years. Mm-hmm. If anything, I pardoned my vice president, and I pardoned myself.
It's a natural consequence flowing from the insanity of prosecuting a former president and trumping up, no pun intended, charges and prosecuting him as a political weapon. Now you're going to start an abuse of the pardon process. So Biden does his DOJ prosecutes Trump and all of Trump's people, or a lot of Trump's people, and he's so worried about that happening to him, so he's pardoning everybody. So now Trump's going to do the same thing. And the next president, welcome to the club. Here we go.
Right.
So if you want to render pardons meaningless, this is the way you do it.
Any future prosecutions for Hunter that may not even be contemplated right now, but for anything he did in the past 10 years.
This is the Minority Report of pardons.
It's bizarre.
Right.
So my happy thing is this is an automotive clutch disc. And my company, I sell mail order car parts. I think the audience knows that. And I just want to say how happy and wonderful it is that I can still have an American company using all American sourced materials make this at a super competitive price. So the same clutch from a Japanese supplier is $497 for this clutch. I sell this for $190. And for an American company to be able to do that and compete internationally, so I just love this, right? And these guys are from Ohio, and I just wanted to say, man,
what's the company?
Small. It's called Ram Clutches, and they're out of North Canton.
So they can give me a clutch for my 68 GTO?
Oh, I could fix you up. Absolutely. You let me know. I'll get it for you at cost.
Good for them.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, I love these guys. They're great.
That's great.
American dream. Wonderful, Brett.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of wonderful. I've had a very bad week.
Yeah.
In regards to news, and that's my fault for digging too deep into stuff, and we even talked about that. Yeah, I just don't have it.
Can I throw you one?
Do, please.
Because I think you've talked about term limits, and you are tired of people who are in office for 45 years and never get out of the way. So Bernie Moreno and Ted Cruz are introducing a constitutional amendment for federal term limits.
There you go.
Yeah,
we'll see if
that gets any less.
Yeah, see if it does. Exactly. But no, that'd be good. That would be good.
Well, look, I think we've already talked about it, but I think it's pretty wonderful what Zuckerberg has done, and irrespective of his motives,
we'll
right?
see.
So it's what you do, not why you do it sometimes, and irrespective of his motives, and why that. And look, harkening back to where we started with common sense and Thomas Paine, the idea here is to bring you folks through independent media sources, bring the world through independent media sources. An alternative.
Yeah, free speech, man. That's what we're about.
We are here in the basement of a studio in Columbus, Ohio, talking about stuff and exploring things, arguing with each other, sometimes intensely, sometimes agreeing with each other intensely. But the idea is we get to do this, and it's because we can. And if guys like Zuckerberg are staying on this trend that don't squelch us just because they don't agree with what we're saying, then that gives all of us, just like Thomas Paine, the ability to do it without hiding in a back room with a secret printing press. So
I don't think people understand really. So in England right now, the City of London's police chief has said that if British people spout up on social media about immigration policy in a way that attacks the government, he will arrest you. And he said, furthermore, he will extradite Americans that talk about British immigrant. And we got the First Amendment here. And that's what Steve's saying, man. We take this for granted. We would get arrested in other countries.
It's like when Thomas Paine was saying, making the argument like, look, when you live under tyranny for so long, you don't realize it's tyranny. You think it's normal. It's like we've almost done the opposite. We've lived under this freedom for so long. We didn't realize how precious it really is until the last 5 to 10 years with social media. Now it's all of a sudden, wait a minute, how come our posts aren't getting any traction and everybody else's are? Mm-hmm. We're not used to that here in this country.
No.
And I will venture to say, as typically speaking, Americans, it may take us a while to wake up, but when we do, there's a backlash. And
That's right.
I think we're living the backlash.
I think you're right
now.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
All right.
Well said, Steve.
All right, that is Common Sense Ohio. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com. If you like the legal stuff, by the way, just to maybe give myself a selfish plug, check out lawyertalkpodcast.com, where I focus on the legal stuff, not the political stuff necessarily, and I break down all sorts of legal issues. You can check that out, lawyertalkpodcast.com. But really, thank you for being part of our show in 2025. We look forward to bringing you another 50-ish episodes, and that's what we're going to do right from the middle in Ohio, at least until now.